everyone. Welcome aboard the Ultimate Voyage to Resilience. I am your host, Ambar Paloma, but you can also call me Amber, and you're listening to Lighthouse Within. And y'all, I had quite the little weekend adventure. At one point, I was in the middle of the mountains outside of a town of 8,000 people, ankle deep in mud, with nothing but the stars in the sky and my phone's flashlight showing me my very next step. And let me tell you, there is nothing, and I mean nothing, like being in the literal dark on your path to make you reflect on all the times in life when you figuratively felt in the dark. Navigating uncertainty, trying to build the life you want, wondering if you're even headed in the right direction. This episode is all about how we energetically block the very things we say we want in life, how our actions and beliefs send mixed signals to life, and what happens when we finally choose to trust, to receive, and to align with what we're asking for on our path, even in the midst of uncertainty. I cannot wait to tell you how I found myself in this little kerfuffle. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe and let's get started. I promise you I'm going to tell you the story. But today, I really wanted to talk about the energy we put out into the universe and the energy we invite into our lives. There's so many micro actions we can start to take to step into alignment with the lives we want to live and the things we want to experience. And a recent experience made me reflect on the ways we might be sending mixed signals out into the universe. Let me give you a few examples. You say you want deep love, but when someone asks you how you're feeling, you just say, "I'm fine," instead of opening up. You say you want financial freedom, but when you get extra money, you immediately spend it, maybe on things you don't even need, instead of saving or investing it. You crave recognition, but when someone compliments your work, you downplay it or point out what could have been better. We think we're waiting for life to give us what we want, but sometimes life is waiting for us to be ready to receive it. So the question is, what are you actually telling life to give you? Because life doesn't just respond to what you say you want, it responds to what you're open to receiving. If you engage with life from a place of rejection, you receive more lack. If you engage with life from a place of trust, you receive more guidance. If you engage with life from a place of gratitude, you receive more to be grateful for. And that's where so many of us get stuck. Because even when life tries to give us what we asked for, we reject it without realizing it. Not because we don't want it. No, definitely not because of that. But because deep down, we don't believe it's really ours to have. Maybe you don't even think it's possible. If you believe life is against you, you'll filter out all the ways it's actually working in your favor. So if you're sitting there like, yup, that is so me, don't worry, we're breaking down small actionable ways to start shifting that in this episode. And if you're ready for deeper personalized support to shift into alignment during a season of change, I'm opening up one-on-one coaching soon to help you break through resistance, shift your energy, and actually start receiving what's meant for you. Spots will be limited, so if you want first access, join the waitlist now, linked in my show notes. In the meantime, let me give you a personal example of unintentionally blocking the things you say you want, because stories make everything better, am I right? So I have this insane Portugal bucket list with over 100 things I want to see and do in this country. And one of the things I wanted to see was the almond blossoms that bloom in late February to early March near the Douro Valley, which is like the the main wine producing region of Portugal. It's like the most famous one. So I stayed 2 nights in Amarante, which is famous for its vinho verde, and then I went to the almond blossom route, which is where the kerfuffle happened. But before I got there, on Friday, I took myself to a fancy lunch in Amarante, and when I got there, there was this really nice gentleman, the server, and he greets me and he leads me to my table, and he sees me like struggling with my big, giant, like long winter coat, and he's like, "Oh, can I help you with your coat?" And I was like, "Oh, no, thank you, I got it." So I sat down, but afterwards I was like, why didn't I just let him help me with my coat? And this is where I was sending my own mixed signals out into the universe, because I hope to get married one day. And I imagine this man being kind and good and rooted in his values. But I will totally walk around the world like, oh my goodness, where are all the good, kind men? And then here was this guy who was just being nice with literally no ulterior motive. And I was just like, oh, no, thank you. So later, when I look around and think, where are all the good men? Of course, I won't see them because I'm rejecting their good energy. But it will be very easy for me to think of examples of men I don't want because they are often the ones who don't respect boundaries, who demand attention, and who don't take no for an answer. Because here's the thing with wrong, bad, or harmful energy, it is always the loudest. Chaos, disrespect, negativity, it doesn't wait for an invitation. It barges in, forces itself into your space, and demands to be engaged with. Even if you push back, even if you fight it, the moment you interact with it, you've already let it into your life. But good energy, it will never fight to stay where it isn't wanted. It will never push to be seen. It will never demand for you to receive it. It floats by, and if you reject it, it simply moves along. And good opportunities, the things we say we want in this life, peace, good friendships, good kind people, abundance, these are all examples of this good energy. It's not in your face demanding to be noticed. It'll float by, waiting to be received. On another personal note, I used to really struggle with asking for help. It's something I've had to work on a lot over the years. And if you are also someone who is learning to ask for help, you know that this can land you in some uneven relationships, to put it nicely. But that moment made me reflect on how, you know what, I do want people who show up for me in big and small ways. And this is a good way for me to practice receiving help in small ways. So I was like, you know what? No more mixed signals to the universe. Next time a man wants to be helpful or do something kind and be a gentleman, and I can tell he's not being a creep, important caveat, I'm just going to let him be a gentleman. And so, my first reflection question to you on this episode is, are you sending the universe any mixed signals? Do you say you want something, but given the opportunity, your actions say otherwise? Are you unknowingly rejecting the good energy in your life? Now, this applies to everything. Let me explain what's going on in your brain because it might help all of this sound less woo woo and more tangible. If you've spent years downplaying yourself, rejecting help, or avoiding vulnerability, your brain has formed neural pathways that make those responses automatic. We talked about this before. Neurons that fire together, wire together. The more you turn to a specific action in a certain context, the more that will be wired as your default. Another thing that is going on in your brain is cognitive dissonance. Now, we talk about this all the time, cognitive dissonance. Let me break this down to make sure we're on the same page about it. This is the mental discomfort you feel when your actions contradict your beliefs. So instead of changing your actions, you often rationalize them to reduce that discomfort. For example, if you say you want a loving relationship, but you reject kindness, your brain then creates a story to justify it, saying things to yourself like, well, I don't need help. I'm just a really independent person. Or let's say you want more money, but you feel guilty receiving it. So your brain tells you something like, I shouldn't want more. That would make me greedy. The last point we'll talk about is confirmation bias. The brain has confirmation bias, meaning it looks for evidence to support what it already believes, and it will filter out all the rest. So an example would be me being like, there are no good men in the world, so my brain just filters out evidence of kind, respectful men and only notices the ones who reinforce my belief that there are no good men in the world. And in my case, I was literally blocking the kind, respectful man from even giving me evidence to begin with. Now, you can be doing this with all sorts of things. Anything from saying to yourself things like, nobody likes me, to there aren't good friends out there anymore, or people aren't good friends anymore, I never get my way, or no one ever listens to me. Now, here's the incredibly amazing news. Barring something like brain damage, you are not stuck that way, okay? Your brain is neuroplastic, which means that you can rewire your brain. You can retrain your brain for the habits and the outlooks that you want. But at first, it's going to take conscious effort. Do y'all remember back in the day when we had those like Nintendos and VHS players? I'm dating myself right now. And we had those 3-color cables, the red, the yellow, and the white. I remember I used to have this like tube TV where it wasn't clear which color went where. So if I plugged it in incorrectly, I would get like static images, or I would get the audio but not the visual. And it wouldn't have been enough for me to just be like, oh, I wish my TV would work so I could play Super Mario 64. I was just like listening to little Mario being like, it's a me, Mario, but like I couldn't see a thing. And I remember I used to have to get my like tiny little 5-year-old arms around the tube TV and just like, oh, move it around all the way around so that I can like plug in the cables back to where they're supposed to go. That's basically what you have to do with your brain. But the good news is I was always able to get the cables in the right place to play Super Mario 64. And research shows that depending on what you are rewiring for, you can achieve it within a few months or around a year, which I feel like is really exciting news because a few months to a year of conscious effort versus a lifetime of being unhappy, frustrated, or anxious feels like really good news. And it feels like something you can hold in your hand as tangible. So we're going to break down how to do that in this episode. But for now, I want you to start bringing attention to your contradictions. Ask yourself, are my actions, energy, and beliefs actually aligned with what I say I want? Or am I unknowingly pushing it away? And if you're not aligned in some way, start thinking of what's a micro action I can take to start opening myself up to receive what I truly want. And I really mean micro action, okay? I know that when we are in a place where we might be feeling stuck, anxious, or frustrated with ourselves because we're somehow contributing to our own pain, that it can feel like you want to change everything all at once. Like you might just be like, I am so sick and tired of doing this to myself. And I totally understand that. But the quickest way for you to end back up where you started is to try to fix it all at the same time. Okay? Because you're at level 1 trying to do level 10 changes. So this is what I mean by micro actions. So for example, I say I want to marry a kind, good man one day, but my current actions, they block men from showing me that good men even exist. Like when the waiter offered to help me with my coat and I rejected his small act of kindness. It was a tiny moment, but it made me realize if I don't become more comfortable receiving small acts of kindness, how will I ever receive the full version and not feel anxious about it? So my shift is I'm going to start being more open to the kindness of men. This is a micro action, but it will help me open myself up over time to receiving more of what I want. And it'll also serve to show me that what I say I want is already around me and does exist. So I want you to do a similar breakdown. And if this is the kind of thing you want support with, please go ahead and join my waitlist for one-on-one coaching because I would love to support your journey. Now, put a pin in this because when I say life very quickly gave me an opportunity to put what I said I wanted into practice. So the very next day I wake up and I remember I had spent all of Friday indoors because it was pouring rain. And Saturday I wake up and I'm like, you know what? I don't want to go to that palace that I put on my list for today. I literally just want to be outside. I just want to feel the sun in my face. And I just want to see the almond blossoms. So I ended up driving all the way to Villa Flor, and I got the inside scoop from the woman at the bakery on where to go find the almond blossoms. She's like, you gotta go to the top of the town, you gotta go to the Miraduro. And I was like, all right, you know? So I drive all the way up to the lookout point, and there's this cute little swing up there with the view over the whole valley, and it is like a bright blue sky, sunshiny day. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is so magical. And then there was all these like terracotta roofs and yellow and pink churches up there. All of these like little wooden benches. It was just so cute and pastoral. And sure enough, I saw a few of the almond blossoms up there and I was already like so excited. But from way up there, as I was on the swinging back and forth, I realized that there was a whole field full of the almond blossoms. So I like take out my phone and I'm like, cross-referencing what I'm seeing against Google Maps. And I'm like, oh, this must be where the field is. So I try to get all the way there. And when I get there, I felt like I was in heaven. I was so excited. I had a whole photo shoot. It was like branches just covered in like cotton candy pink and like snow white flowers up against the bright blue sky. There was tall meadow grass with pink and purple wildflowers. And I was so happy. I was in heaven. I felt so like, oh, yes. I'm so happy I didn't go to that palace. I just remember I kept thinking to myself, this is such a magical day. And then it kind of started to sun shower, but at that point it was like 4:30 and the sun set at 6. So I was like, let me drive to my accommodations because I'm in the middle of the mountains and been there, done that. Do not want to drive through the mountains in the middle of the night. And I was also like, ooh, I'm staying on a vineyard tonight. And like, how beautiful would the sunset be from the vineyard? So I start driving and I'm like jamming to my favorite songs when I see this bright, huge double rainbow that looks like it ends just in front of me. I remember my jaw dropped and I was like, this is such a magical day. Because I could see the rainbow perfectly, like every single stripe of the rainbow, the red, the orange, the yellow, the green. I was on cloud nine. So I get to the vineyard and the grounds are stunning. It's massive. It has lakes, waterfalls, cute little villas surrounded by rolling hills, covered in vineyards. The sun is dipping behind the mountains. It's bathing the whole valley in mango orange. And I was like, this is such a magical day. So then the man leads me to my suite. He's like showing me around, and I was like, ooh, ah, because the whole grounds are just like so luxe and so nice. Honestly, y'all, side note, this is like my tip for staying in really nice hotels. Go during off season. It is so cheap. Anyways, he's like walking me into my suite and he's showing me around, and I was just like, wow, you know? And then he's like, yeah, and wait till you see the view. And he pulls back the curtains, and I was just like, oh my goodness. Because the terrace that attached to my suite perfectly had a view of the whole valley and the mountains and was facing the sunset. And I just remember thinking, again, this is such a magical day. Famous last words. So I tell him, I was like, hey, I haven't had anything to eat today besides like a ham and cheese sandwich. Where can I get some dinner? And he was like, okay, well, you have two options. We have a restaurant that is just outside the gates of the vineyard, or you can drive into town. It's just 15 minutes away. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to drive into town. So I go to put gas in my car, and this is where the trouble began, friends, because I put the wrong gas in my car. This is not a laughing matter, actually. I can laugh about it now because, but I remember when I got there, there was a sign that said like, prepay. Mind you, everything that is moving forward in the story is all in Portuguese. So there's a sign that says prepay. And I go inside and I tell the woman like, oh, I want 30 on 3. And she was like, oh, what kind of gas do you want? And I was like, I don't know. It's just a normal car. Like I just need gasolina simples. And she was like, oh, gasolina simples? And I was like, yeah, 30 euros of gasolina simples. And in my mind, I was like, oh, gasolina simples, simple gasoline. I don't know, y'all. Anyways, I go back outside and there's only one pump on. So I'm thinking that's the one. And I pump my gas and I get in and I start driving. Mere moments later, my car starts to sputter. And I was like, what's going on? And then like it just starts losing velocity, which freaked me out because there's all these cars behind me. And I was like, oh my God, I think I have put the wrong gas in my car. And I was just like, where do I pull over? And also, what happens when you put the wrong gas in the car? I was convinced the car was going to explode. So I saw, sorry, I'm just laughing at myself then. I see a gas station at the end of the road with like a mechanic, and I'm just like, I'm cheering the little car on. I'm like, come on, car, come on, car. We got to make it to the gas station. So then I pull up to the gas station and I pull up to one of the pumps and I instantly start Googling what happens when you put the wrong gas in your car. Because again, friends, I was convinced the car was going to explode. When the attendant comes out and he's like, hey, what gas can I put in your car? And I just looked at him with fear in my eyes and I tell him in Portuguese, I think I put the wrong gas in the car. But I was also like, yo, we definitely did not cover roadside emergencies in my Portuguese class. And he looks at me and he's like, what do you mean you put the wrong gas in the car? And I was like, it said gasolina simples. And he was like, yeah, but which one? And what do you mean which one? Why is there more than one simple gasoline? And he was like, what did it say underneath? I was like, B7. He takes a look at my car. He's like, B7, pull over. He starts running into the gas station. I was like, oh my goodness, what have I done? Suddenly, I'm surrounded by like three Portuguese men speaking to me really fast. They're like, how much did you put? How far did you drive? Where's the receipt? Where did you rent this car from? Where are you coming from? Where are you going? And I was like, when your brain is like flooded with adrenaline because you're in the middle of a bad situation. And I was like, Portuguese is my third language. I was like, slowly, please, slowly. So they suddenly started speaking really slowly, but actually they were really helpful. And they explained to me that it probably was an easy fix, but because I drove the car, it would have to be drained and they would have to clean out all the pieces. And I was like, oh, okay, but it can be fixed. And they were like, yeah, it can be fixed. And I was like, okay, so what do we have to do? And he was like, well, the thing is, it's Saturday night. So all of the mechanics in this village and all of the surrounding villages are closed. I was like, what do you mean they're closed? Well, when do they open? He said, well, 9 a.m. And I was like, oh, fantastic. So can I just leave the car here? He says on Monday. And I was like, what? And yeah, so obviously, like at this point, I was like, okay, I think I need to call roadside assistance because I'm in the middle of nowhere. The car doesn't work, and I literally don't know what else to do. So I called roadside assistance, and they were like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have to tow the car. And I was like, tow the car? I'm like 2 hours away from a city, and I was like, how am I supposed to get back home? They were like, well, you're just going to have to like get a new car. And I was like, how am I supposed to do that? And they were like, well, you're going to have to go back to Porto. And I was like, I don't live in Porto. I live in Lisbon. And Porto's like 2 hours away. Anyways, they end up sending the tow truck, but it took like an hour for the tow truck to get there because it had to come from another village. But the whole time I felt like my little posse of Portuguese men, they kept like coming up and checking in on the situation and checking up on me and like, hey, do you need anything? And consoling me and being like, hey, you know what? It could happen to any of us. The pumps are really confusing in Portuguese. He's like, the word for diesel is gasoleo, but the word for gasoline is gasolina. And I was like, but I thought I put gasolina simples. And then they were like, oh, well, you must have put this one. And sure enough, it said gasolina simples B7. And I was like, I'm so done. But I just felt so dejected. Like I was so visibly sad. And they were like, they were like really consoling me. They were like, they're there. It's okay. And then when the tow truck came up, they like all went and they shook his hands and they explained the situation to him. And then when the taxi came, they were like, hey, make sure to take her here because that's where she's staying. And I just remember I kept hearing them say, she doesn't speak a lot of Portuguese. In the back of my mind, though, I'm not going to lie, because I was sad, but in the back of my mind, I was laughing because I was like, did I not just say yesterday that I wanted to be more open to the kindness of men? Here it was, friends, not in the way I was expecting, but exactly when I needed it the most. How often do we miss out on the things that we're asking for because it doesn't arrive in the form we imagined? I was like, God, when I said that, I meant like, letting the man help me with my coat, not being stranded in the mountains. Between these two stories, it made me realize we don't have to chase what is meant for us, but we do have to be open to receiving it. The universe is always giving us opportunities to step into the next level. You just have to decide that you're ready for it. I could have blocked this opportunity in their good energy, saying something to myself like, I'm stranded in the middle of the mountains with nothing but weirdo men who don't speak English, which certainly as a woman traveling by herself, that wouldn't have been an irrational thought, to be fair. But instead, I was so grateful for their kindness, and they helped me figure out a solution in a situation that would have been really scary to deal with by myself. I also felt very grateful that I otherwise had a very magical day and that I have a routine self-care practice where I emotionally regulate every day because it is much easier to handle things like this with a regulated nervous system than when you already feel stressed. So I decided to focus on taking care of myself for the rest of the night. The taxi ended up dropping me off at the restaurant that belonged to the vineyard just outside of the vineyard gates. And I had a super delicious steak dinner with some of the wine from the vineyard that was so divine, so good. I ended up buying a whole bottle to share with my girlfriends at our Women's Day celebration. So I grabbed the bottle and I start walking towards the vineyard. but I noticed I only had two options here. Like I said, the restaurant was just outside the gates of the vineyard, but all the other gates to the vineyard were along a dark highway. And Google Maps said it was a 23-minute walk back to my building. So I'm like, let me just go inside of the vineyard. That way I'm already on the property. And certainly that sounds safer than walking along a dark highway at night in the middle of the mountains. As with all routes in Portugal, it started with an uphill climb, and the further I got from the restaurant, the more and more I found myself surrounded by total darkness. I ended up taking out my phone to illuminate the path, but the more I stepped forward, the softer the ground started feeling. I could tell I was walking through the more agricultural part of the property before you get to the accommodations, and at this point, I was just straight up sinking into the ground. And I was like, should I turn back? But I was already halfway there and I was like, what is the alternative? Like, what is the actual alternative? If I walk back and call for a taxi, I might have to wait hours for it to come from another village just to take me on a 3-minute drive. If I walk down along the highway, I risk someone coming by really, really fast and literally running me over. So I was like, I guess this is my best path. That moment sinking into the mud as I kept walking, literally surrounded by darkness, not knowing what the heck was in front of me, felt like such a metaphor for so many seasons of life. The ones where you can't see the way forward, where you're stuck, where all you want is clarity, but all you get is your very next step. Those seasons in life where you've had enough bad moments for the day, for the season, for your life, and you just want to be okay, safe in your bed, but all you get is your next step into the mud. And in those moments, we don't just face uncertainty, we face a choice. That choice of what energy we want to engage with. Do you want to invite in panic, or do you want to invite in peace? Do you want to spiral into fear, or do you allow trust to meet you where you are? Will you fixate on how lost you feel? Or will you soften into the possibility that the way forward is unfolding, even if you can't see it yet? This is what I mean when I say that every moment, every challenge is a conversation with the universe, because the energy we engage with shapes what we receive in return. If we react with fear, we receive more things to be afraid of. If we react with trust, we make more room for the answers to meet us. If we fixate on what's missing, we block ourselves from receiving what's already present. And honestly, I felt so scared in that moment because I was just standing in the dark, wondering where I was and if I was even on the right path. So I started to pray, but not in a panic, oh God, why is this happening to me kind of way, but in a, God, I know you are with me kind of way. And I must have repeated this on loop for like 5 minutes as my feet sunk more and more into the ground. My shoes were soaked, my socks were soaked, the bottoms of my pants were dirty, and I just kept affirming myself to keep myself calm. God, I know you are with me. And finally, I felt solid concrete beneath my feet. I finally got back to my suite, took a shower, put on my pajamas, and stepped out onto the terrace and into the night. And when I looked up, I couldn't help but marvel at the sky full of stars. And here's another reflection I want to share with you. There are certain sources of light you can only see in the dark. In other words, there are certain sources of good energy you will only experience in your darkest moments. You will only discover how strong you are when life tests you beyond what you thought you could endure and you're still standing. You will only experience the depth of someone's kindness when you are struggling and they meet you with open arms instead of judgment. You will only understand the beauty of generosity when someone steps in to help you, unasked, at a moment when you needed it most. You will only realize how flexible and capable you are when life throws every plan out the window and yet you still move forward. The stars are always there. They are always there hanging above you, but there are certain sources of light you will only see in the dark. And when life feels dark, when you have gone through a situation that feels like sinking into mud, you have a choice. Which energy do you want to invite into your life? Will you fixate on the night, or will you look for the stars? It's so natural in these moments to get into panic mode, because it's been our wired behavior. But could this be another area where you are sending mixed signals out into the universe? What do you want to receive more of in this life? Is it good people? Is it inner strength? Is it calm and confidence? Just like we have to align our actions with what we say we want, we also have to align our trust with what we say we believe in, whether that's goodness, the process, divine guidance, or even just your own resilience. Rejecting kindness from the waiter and rejecting trust in the mud are similar, pushing away good energy out of habit while inviting in bad energy. So, what if instead of resisting, we softened into trust? What if we bring down the walls that keep us from the things we want and allow ourselves to receive? To tell life, hey, I'm ready. Please send me more of this good energy. So, how do we shift this? How do we make sure we're actually open to receiving what we say we want and trusting the process, even when we can't see the whole path, so we can get more good energy into our lives? I promised I would tell you. Here are 5 next steps you can try. And remember, you just need to keep taking the next right step while trusting that the path will unfold before you. Rewiring your brain isn't about overhauling your entire life overnight. It starts small, with everyday moments where we choose to respond differently. And when we do, it compounds, shifting your entire brain. Stay at each level until you're ready for the next one. The first thing I want you to do is to start noticing your contradictions. Catch yourself in the moment when you deflect a compliment, reject help, or say no to something you actually want. Once you're ready, start challenging your thoughts. Ask yourself, why did I just do that? What am I afraid of? When you're ready, start rewiring with micro actions. Instead of changing everything at once, start with small shifts. Say thank you instead of, you didn't have to do that. Say, let me check my schedule first before overcommitting to one more thing. Take a moment to breathe and calm down before blowing up in anger. 4. Start visualizing yourself receiving. Spend a few minutes daily imagining yourself confidently accepting love, success, or help. This primes you to notice those moments in real life and seize them. And finally, change the narrative. So much of this work is about identity work. It's about who you are and who you want to be. So instead of telling yourself these stories like, I don't need help, try, it's safe to receive kindness. Instead of the story that I'm so bad with money, try, I'm learning to handle money wisely. If this message hit home for you, if you're realizing that maybe, just maybe, you've been blocking the very things you say you want, I want you to know this. You don't have to navigate this shift alone. This is exactly what I will help you with. Retraining the ways you engage with life, shifting your energy, and learning how to actually receive what's already meant for you. So if you're ready to start making those shifts in a real tangible way, go ahead and join my waitlist for one-on-one coaching in the show notes. There's something else I want to reassure you of. This whole situation actually made me think of a famous quote by Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela went through much worse things than putting the wrong gas in his car and walking through a muddy vineyard, but it reminded me of his quote. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. We think that having courage means being totally cool, calm, and collected, but it's not. Mark Twain said something similarly. Courage is not the lack of fear, it is acting in spite of it. So I don't want you to think that just because you're scared of change or just because you're worried if you're capable, that means you can't do it. You don't have to lack fear to be courageous. True courage is continuing to take the next right step, even when you're scared, even when you're worried, even when you're anxious. You don't have to lack fear to be courageous. And soon I will be offering more one-on-one support to help you do that. It was funny to me because men ended up taking care of me all weekend. The next day, a man picked me up to drive me all the way to Porto, a 2-hour drive. He stayed with me at the rental car office until the situation got sorted. And at the office, it was a man who helped me figure everything out and reassured me, even upgrading my car because he could tell how sad I was. And just like that, what started off as a disaster became a full circle moment, one where I could have let fear take over, but instead I chose to trust. And in return, life met me with kindness, support, unexpected grace, and numerous opportunities to witness the existence of kind, good men. This story really wasn't about a car. It was about how we move through life. How often do we resist the unknown? How often do we resist good energy and sit in the bad energy? How often do we block the things we say we want in life, like kindness, support, love, while highlighting how bad things can be? Which brings me to this. This would not be an episode of The Lighthouse Within without a final message. So if you're ready, close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, take a deep breath in. Let the air fill your lungs, let it soften the tension in your body, and let it ground you in the here and now. Exhale, and feel the steady rhythm beneath your palm, the quiet, unshaken proof that you are alive, that you are here, that you are still moving forward, even when you can't see the road ahead. Now, with your hands still over your heart, please receive this message. The things you are longing for, the love, the support, the opportunities, they are not as far as they seem. They are circling you, waiting for you to open your hands and say, I am ready. So often we convince ourselves we have to fight for what is meant for us, that we have to chase, to prove, to force things into place. But the truth is, what is meant for you does not need to be forced. It needs to be received. And receiving starts in the smallest ways, the quiet yes, the softened resistance, the choice to believe that good things are meant for you too. And when you begin to make space for them, when you stop rejecting what you say you want out of habit, when you start opening yourself to life instead of bracing against it, that is when the shift happens. So take another deep breath in. Feel how supported you are in this moment. You don't have to rush. You don't have to force. You don't have to know every answer. Your only job? To take the next small step, to open your hands, to say yes to the goodness that is already trying to find you. And exhale. When you're ready, please open your eyes. Thank you for being here, for trusting yourself enough to walk this path, for choosing again and again to move forward, even in uncertainty. If this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you. DM me, let's talk. And if you're looking for deeper personalized support, my one-on-one coaching waitlist is now open. Spots will be limited, so be sure to sign up in the show notes. And if you want a guide to start this journey right now, download my free Clarity Compass today in the show notes. But until next time, hold this truth close. Life is not asking you to chase. It is asking you to receive. It is asking you to trust. And when you are ready, everything you are seeking will rise to meet you. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.